I'm Rhett Nelson with EastIdahoNews.com, and I'm pleased to be in studio today with Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke. He's visiting our side of the state this week, and we have some issues that we're excited to talk about with him ahead of the upcoming general election. So, Scott, glad that you could be here with us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. This is my side of the state too. You know, I guess I'm from Magic Valley, but everybody else thinks I'm in eastern Idaho, so here I am.
You were in Salmon yesterday.
Yeah.
That would have been Wednesday.
Yes.
Visiting with the folks on the Moose Fire,
Mm-hmm.
largest active fire in the U.S. How was that?
Well,
visit
it
there?
was, it's pretty sobering, frankly. I mean, if you live in Salmon, you've been in the smoke now for 9 weeks, and it's starting to get old. That fire started on the 17th of July. Went from 0 to 500 acres, in a couple of hours. The winds were 40 miles an hour that day, and conditions were just perfect for that to take off. And then that, as we all know that have been there, I mean, that is very rugged country. But it also had a large buildup of fuel, in the trees and the fallen timber, and that fire has made some spectacular runs in the last few weeks. It was interesting to talk to the firefighters and to get their perspective. We lost 2 firefighters on that fire back in July when their helicopter crashed when they were dipping water out of the river right there. And so the whole thing has kind of a sobering air about it. Those guys are all business. They want to keep everybody safe. I think one thing they're concerned about right now is there's a drainage above the city of Salmon where they get their drinking water, and they're doing everything they can to keep that fire from going over the top and into that drainage, because that would be bad, I guess, for the water, obviously. So they're doing everything they can. Luckily, we've had a little bit of rain in the last few days there, not enough to drown it out completely, but it has certainly helped the efforts, and they're able to get on top of things. It's not dry and windy like it had been, and I came up through Stanley, and there's of course a pretty good fire over there around Alturas Lake. There's a huge fire encampment right there at the mouth of 4th of July Creek, where there's 700 or 800 people in a tent city there that are fighting that one. We came through in the evening, and you could see trees that were still on fire there. It didn't look to me like they got quite as much rain as they did over towards Chalice, but anyway, they're all hoping for more rain. And these big fires like that are in heavy timber are probably going to have to be put out by Mother Nature in the fall.
Yeah. This it's been an interesting wildfire season because it kind of got started later.
Yeah.
Because we had a cold June, and now here we are into September, and we're still dealing with some of these big fires.
Well, we had a very dry winter, and so those plants, were dry. And then we did have the good rainfall that got a lot of grass growing, and then it turned off hot and dry, like it always does in that part of the world. 100 degree, down in that canyon. We've all been on the river there. I know how hot it can be there. Mm-hmm. And then you put the wind on top of that, and it had all of the right ingredients for a big fire.
Well, I like you said, we certainly wish the fire crew the best, and hope they're able to stay safe.
That's a horrible tragedy. Those guys are 100% committed to their job. Yes. And and then to have I don't know that the report is not out. We don't know exactly what happened, but everything points to a mechanical problem with the helicopter. It looks like, and anyway, so it's a terrible tragedy, but those guys are 100% committed, and the fire crews that are up there are very professional. They're the townsfolk are, like I say, they're kind of tired of it all, but they're understanding as well. So it's, anyway,
Yeah.
everybody's hoping that it will rain more this weekend.
Oh, of course, of course. So let's get into some other issues here. One thing I wanted to ask you about is there's been an ongoing conflict there's been an irrigation lawsuit, and I'm going to give kind of some background here. You correct me if I'm wrong. This is just based on the information I was able to gather.
Okay.
So it's an issue dating back to 2015, from what I understand. It involves canal irrigators in the Magic Valley and groundwater irrigators in eastern Idaho. And there is a conflict about water usage. There was a settlement on this in 2015. What was that original settlement?
Well, a little more background. In Idaho, whoever had the water first, is first in time, and therefore they are the first in right. So it's called the prior appropriation doctrine. So the surface water interest in the Magic Valley laid claim on the river water before the groundwater pumpers did. And in Idaho, we managed both the surface water and the groundwater as if it were one water resource because they are hydrologically connected. The flows that come into the Snake River between Blackfoot and the Minidoka Reservoir, but more specifically between Blackfoot and Neely, those are the waters that end up in the canals down in Twin Falls and on the north side there. And so, so back in 2015, as the year it kind of all came to a head, if you will, and where the water agreement was reached, the surface water guys knew that they were senior, and everybody, no one questioned the fact that they were senior. And they called their water because it was a dry year. And of course, the groundwater interest in the Magic Valley as well as eastern Idaho were junior to their call. But I think to their credit, they didn't want to put their neighbors out of business, and so they said, if we'll just get an agreement so that it will put us back on a trajectory to stop the drop in the aquifer and to heal it over time, then we're okay with that. And the groundwater interests agreed as well. Knew that we were collectively taking more water out of the ground than was coming back in naturally, and that our water budget, if you will, was out of balance. And so that's basically what the agreement in 2015 did, was to set us on a course that would bring stop the drop in the aquifer, begin to raise the levels in the aquifer, and then and then everybody was to conserve and measure and be on top of the use. And everything worked great. Remember we had great water years in 2017 for sure, and 18, and then it became more normal years, and then we had a drought year in 2021 where there was very little water, and everybody had to rely on it. And it was hot and dry like it was this summer as well. What saved us this year is with those spring rains that we got in late May and June. And so that kind of took the pressure off, but the agreement, the underlying agreement is adaptive. And so if we're not hitting the marks that everybody said by this date, we're going to have the water level here. If we're not, and then if we don't accomplish that, then we have to rewrite the agreement. The agreement is adaptive in nature, and it's a series of ifs, thens. And so that's what happened. What we thought would work in 2015, now we have 7 years more of experience, and we've got to change the underlying agreement. What happened specifically in 2021, it was hot, it was dry, and the parties, depending on who you talk to, anyway, were outside of the agreement, and so that kind of brought everybody to the table again. But they knew, whether you were senior or junior or surface or ground, you knew that what we thought we would do, what we did in 2015, we thought that would accomplish the goal. It's not going to quite do that. And so there needs to be some internal adjustments. And so that's what you're seeing now, is to mediate for the underperformance, if you will, in 2021, But the eye, we need to keep our eye on the prize, which is to get the overall agreement on a trajectory that will take good care of our water resources. We don't want to mine the aquifer. We want to just take out of it that comes in. So we're going to have to, we're going to have to average, so we're going to do water, we're going to do recharge. So every spring when we have extra water, we want to be putting that back in the aquifer to take out in times when we don't have the spring runoff. And that makes sense to me. And we've been very active at the state level of doing a managed recharge program. But arguably we haven't been putting the water back into the ground where it would do us the most benefit. We put a lot of water in the ground, but it doesn't help the Blackfoot to Neely reach as much as it could. And so you'll see our efforts as a state to putting up more infrastructure to, when we have the water in the river, to divert over into that part of the world, not the easy stuff, arguably, that we have been doing. Mm-hmm. Not that it's been easy. I mean, we've moved heaven and earth, but we're not done yet, and we need to keep investing back into our state's water supply. We're not putting new reservoir systems on the river itself, but we do have a big reservoir under the ground that we can put water into and then take out of, and that's what we need to be doing. So yeah, there's been a little dust up here of late, but I think we're back on track to get everybody to work in good faith to modify the underlying agreement so that so that we can optimize the use of the water. Now, we've been discovered as a state. We're the fastest growing state in the nation, and our economy is one of the fastest growing economies. And in this part of the world, that's ag. That's ag and food processing, and it's dairy. And so we have geared our production to, for milk cows that need corn and alfalfa, away from arguably small grains and potatoes. And so I think there are things that we can do with regard to our crop rotations, but it's going to boil down to water conservation. Maybe we're irrigating more acres than we really have water to do. And those are the hard questions that we've all got to face as we work this out. So you're seeing the start of a more serious, longer conversation about balancing the water that we have here in the state with the uses.
When is there going to be a final decision?
Well, it's we're in hopes to have the agreement modified by early spring next year. So people can modify their planting decisions and what they're going, they have obligations. All farmers have obligations back to their lien holders, etc. We don't want to be disruptive here. We want to be able to plan for the future. And so the quicker we get it done, the better off everyone will be.
Well, I have read reports where there's some eastern Idaho farmers who are worried about the possibility of, losing their water, losing access to the water. Anything you want to say on that point, particularly to farmers in eastern Idaho?
Well, I am one too. Mm-hmm. And I've been, I'm well steeped, if you will, in this issue. And I've been right in the middle of trying to mediate a positive agreement for both interests. So what I would pledge to them, of course, is my best efforts in that. It is to continue to be fair to both sides. We got to be fair to our Constitution and to our water law. And we're trying to optimize our water resource here in the arid West, where it's always an issue. If it's any consolation, we are doing it better than Colorado and some of these other states that are arguably that haven't done it that well. The Colorado River system, of course, there's millions of people dependent on that, and we're going through a drought, and our systems west-wide are not drought-proof. We need to be making Idaho's system drought-proof. Now that's easy to say, but that takes hard work. But basically what it means is over time, on average, we've got to use the same amount of water as was coming into the system, because no one supports a mining of our water resource. So it's going to be tricky. It's going to take everybody's best efforts and their good faith efforts, but I think we can pull it off. But it will mean using less water in order to get the water budget back into balance. And that is going to pinch in places, but we want to minimize the amount of injury that happens there. But we have to do that all within the confines of the prior appropriation doctrine, which is first in time is first in right. And so if the seniors need their water, then they're entitled to their water under law, but maybe they're okay with some other arrangement of how to deliver it to them and those types of things. So we're very creative as Idahoans on this issue, and the farmers have been at it for a long time now. And we've had a hiccup. We've had 2 dry years in a row, and it stress tested the underlying agreement. And but we've learned things, and we need to incorporate the things we've learned back into the system.
Another water issue I wanted to ask you about, and this isn't one you're personally involved in, but it's one that affects all Idahoans. This proposal by Congressman Simpson to breach 4 dams on the lower Snake River. Your thoughts on that proposal?
Well, I'm against the idea. I don't think. I mean, while the goal of recovering the fish runs is laudable and and worthwhile, but I don't think it should come at the expense of the system that we put together. The fish runs are going down not because of things that we're doing here in Idaho, but it is the oceanic conditions that are happening way out of our control. And the reason I can say this with a surety is if you take the Columbia system and you track the fish runs in the Columbia, and you have a bar chart that shows the ups and downs of those runs, and you take the Fraser River system and overlay the fish runs over the Columbia, you'll see the same trends out of the Fraser system that we do in the Columbia Snake system. But the difference between the two systems is we have dams, they have 0 dams. And so the fish runs are mirroring the Fraser, and the Fraser is mirroring the Columbia Snake, and it has nothing to do with what is happening in the uplands. It's happening out in the ocean, and that's the problem. So taking the dams out, I mean, these dams are as fish friendly as you can possibly get them, and I've toured them and talked to them, all the biologists as well. And we have made major investments in those dams to take care of the fish. But when you have that type of data that is coming from other river systems that mirrors our own, to blame it on the dams is not good science.
So you're against that issue?
So I'm against it. Half of Idaho's wheat goes through that port in Lewiston, so it can get to the markets on the West Coast and on the Pacific Rim. That's the cheapest way to move that many pounds of commodity is on the barges on the river. We're highly dependent on the electricity that comes from that. This part of the nation is growing, and we're power electricity hungry, and I think it's folly to remove those dams and the hydroelectric capacity that they have.
All right. A few hot button issues that I wanted to get into with you over the last, several months, year. I guess we'll start with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. The abortion laws, how that's going to impact abortion laws in the state of Idaho. That's been a big news item and topic of conversation. What's your stance on going forward?
Going forward, well, let's talk about the decision, the Dodd decision. basically said it's not the United States Supreme Court's job to set the policies out in the various states. And so they kicked the decision making on this issue back to the various states, well, to the 50 states. And so I've always been very pro-life, and still am. And so we'll see what happens. I believe that, and so we had a trigger law that we put on the books, and that we said if Roe is ever overturned, then this is what the abortion policy will look like in Idaho. And now people are saying, well, that's not specific enough, and it has holes in it, and I don't know that it does, frankly. I think that it incorporates most Idahoans' approach to this, which is I'll speak for myself. I'm against elective abortion, period. Mm-hmm. However, when the life of the mother is in danger or at risk, then it's not just black and white. So all of the issues around miscarriage management, those have got to be further addressed. All the issues around a non-viable fetus have got to be addressed. All the issues around being able to get pregnant again, in the health care that is provided, there needs to be clear policy statements there. And then, of course, in the instances of rape or incest, I think that's another question. Those are my values. Those are the areas where I would say, whoa, let's stop and talk. Again, completely against any elective abortion. But there are instances that I think we need to talk about and create some policy on it. Now, there are broader statements in the Idaho Code that when they were put in there, everyone assumed that, we wouldn't, the life of the mother, rape, incest, etc. Those would be, but now that there's closer scrutiny, maybe it's time that everybody goes back and gets a definitive statement in each of those areas that are not always black and white. And, so I believe that, it's a good thing. I wish that the Supreme Court would continue to empower states on state issues. This is about states' rights. And then what Idaho does may be different than what our neighbors do. And that's as it should be, frankly. Mm-hmm. And so I welcome this federalist turn that maybe the court has taken in that puts the power for these decisions. If it's not what the Supreme Court said, basically, if it's not clearly in the Constitution, it's not our job to come up with policy. It's the state's job, and I think that's healthy.
There has also been some increased reports of arrests due to fentanyl usage.
Yes,
it's become an increasing issue. You're part of the governor's working group with this, Operation Esto Perpetua. Is that how you say it?
Perpetua.
Yeah. Okay, I'm putting the wrong emphasis there. Anyway,
well, we got to brush up on our Latin, I guess.
I guess so. Just what's the plan to protect Idahoans from this?
Well, and I was happy to serve on that committee. What it did for me, though, was open my eyes. I did not know how pervasive fentanyl was in our state. Obviously, it comes from an open southern border that where there is zero quality control on their illicit drugs that they send up here. And fentanyl is dangerous. It's inexpensive and it's available. And our law enforcement agencies are being overwhelmed with this new type of drug that is a synthetic opioid, but it is very addictive and very potent. And it should give everybody pause. If you're in Boise, the buses are advertising Narcan. And so if it's that prevalent that that everybody needs to be aware of the antidotes, if you will, to opioid overdose, then that points fingers back at our society. So what I've learned is we're probably not going to arrest our way out of this one. This is going to be an all of the above a solution. So we need to support our law enforcement and make sure they have every resource they need. But this is so dangerous that if you just have it on your clothes and first responder touches it, then they can overdose. It will kill them as well. Mm-hmm. And so, we need to have all the resources out there, including Narcan, everywhere we can have it. But and then we need to put increased, all the other things we've always done about illicit drugs. So law enforcement, and then we've got to rehab the addicts. We got to get them treatment. And probably prison is not the best place to get treated. We need to beef up our response there for as far as treatment centers and in community treatment centers, and but it is very pervasive in the state. We are kind of a crossroads state, so north on Highway 90. And down here with 80 and 84 coming through with I-15, these transportation corridors are where the drugs are. They're coming into our state, and we've always had some drug problem, but this has put that problem arguably on steroids.
Another issue, and this isn't widely discussed, but I know there was some conversation about this in the last legislative session, ESG scores. Some people may not be familiar with that. It's my understanding it's where the federal government is trying to impose environmental, social, and governance standards in the business world.
Well, I don't know that it's the federal government per se, but these are, if you're a publicly held and publicly traded big corporation, then you have a board of directors that is, may or may not be concerned about how environmentally sensitive you are, and so that they're going to invest money into businesses, they want to have some assurance back that they're doing everything quote right, and so that's the ESG score, the Enviro-Social Governance score. But it's not. I don't think it originates at the government level. It originates in a boardroom of those types of thinking, where there's that type of thinking. I think it's dangerous. What we did as a state was say that we have a lot of money here as well in our pension funds, and the state has that invests, and we're going to prohibit any investment based on ESG scores. What we're going to do is the old-fashioned research, and is this a good place, a secure place that'll have a proper return for the money that our pensioners have put into it. We're not going to base our investment decisions on ESG scores, nor should we. But there are others that do. And so there's a fine line between ESG scores and some of the contracts that we're all in as we raise our commodities. I mean, I sell my cattle to entities that expect certain things and certain quality assurances. We sell our potatoes a similar way, and we let people come and we do audits of our farms during the growing season to make sure that we're growing a quality, safe product. Same with our malting barley, etc. All of these businesses are that's not what we're talking about. ESG is when you have these huge financial entities that make their decisions based on how and then of course there's no standard definition based on how they think, how environmentally sensitive you are. That's where it gets dangerous. And it drives, and so there's enough money there that it drives decisions at these businesses, and that's what's scary.
There was because we had another budget surplus in the state of Idaho, there was another tax cut, an education spending bill that was passed. Talk about what does this mean for Idahoans going forward?
Well, directly, what we did here a couple of Thursdays ago was, the governor called the legislature into special session, where he sets the agenda. But the agenda was one that was pretty widely accepted. What it did was it took $500 million, $500 million, and returned it to Idahoans. We're facing record inflation. How that affects your family is different than how it affects mine, and it affects our neighbor a third way. And so it was not earmarked for food or property taxes or any of the other hot button issues out there. It was just, it's cash that is going to be in your checkbook by the end of the month. So if you're filing separately or individually, that's $300. If you're a joint filer, that's $600, or 10% of what you paid in 2020 in Idaho state income taxes, whichever is larger. So that's going to be real money back in your pocket that you can use to blunt the effects of inflation in your situation.
And when are Idahoans going to see that?
Well, hopefully by the end of the September. It's a quick turnaround, and we're able to do that because we sent also the same rebate based on the same criteria back in May. And then Idahoans, so here's how a surplus happens. The legislature sets a conservative budget. We keep the wheels on the wagons at all the agencies and the schools and everything, but we don't overspend. And then Idahoans work, and there's a great work ethic here. So families and individuals and small business and large business, they've gone to work, and so that work that is tax basically finds its way back through the tax code and there in Boise, and we have more money than we need to cover the budget. And so we're sending it back to the people that paid the taxes in the first place. That was the first part of what we did. The second part was all about overall business climate. And we want to be a business-friendly state. We want people to be able to have good jobs here and have jobs available for our kids that come back, when they when they go through the education systems, to have a good job waiting for them back in Idaho. And so the second part is that we took the state income taxes and did some significant change there. The way it used to be, you paid income tax on the first dollar that you earned, and it worked its way up through a series of brackets, and then the top bracket was at 6%. But what we did in the special session was to eliminate all the brackets. And instead of taxing you on the first dollar, if you're an individual, you get the first $4,500 tax-free, no tax consequence. If you're filing jointly, that's $9,000. And then the next dollar that you earn after that is taxed at 5.8. So it's a flat tax at 5.8 with the first $4,500 and $9,000 tax-free to everyone. So that's real tax relief to every Idahoan. And so that basically hangs a sign on our window that says Idaho is open for business. But another component, an important component of our business climate, is education. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat or left or right or wherever, we all want our kids to be well educated. Mm-hmm. Now, and we want that to whether we're our kids or grandkids, we want them to be well prepared for what happens after school. And so the third thing that happened in the special session is that we created a bucket, and we put $410 million on it, plus a sticky note that said intended for education. But we'll let the strings to the use of that money will be attached in January when the legislature, the full legislature comes in, the new legislature, and they'll decide to whom and how much and under what conditions that money will flow out to education. But it's my hope that we'll put a chunk of that into these fast-growing careers in the trades. They're begging for workers, plumbers, electricians, welders, pipe fitters, all of those technical trades. So we got to be turning out kids that can read a tape measure and a level and a square and a set of blueprints and a set of schematics and those types of things and they need to have the rudimentary skills for welding and other types of things. But the companies will do the technical training in a lot of those areas, but we need to be turning out kids that can go hit the ground running in these high-paying careers in trades, if that's what they want to do. Obviously, we need to have a robust college and university system, but I think we need to emphasize trade schools and community colleges and their programs that can get a quick turnaround of these kids, and they can go get a good job, and they can start supporting themselves, maybe go back to school when they really know what they want to do. But I think that's the intent, is, coupled with positive and good tax climate is good, is a good school system as well. That's what makes a positive business climate. And I think we've been successful doing that largely. I mean, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the nation. We're the best place to live, to work, and to raise a family. And we have been discovered, and people know that. And so our challenge as we go forward will be to keep this, to keep our Idaho values. We've been successful in putting Idaho values back into our policies. And the challenge is to not let all of this new growth change who we are. I don't want to wake up 10 years from now and wonder where our Idaho went. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to recognize it. I want to still be able to embrace it. And I think that's our challenge. So going forward, there will be the challenges that are inherent with growth and fast growth. And I think we took positive steps to keep Idaho well positioned in that special session.
Well, Scott, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate your time and your information. As we look ahead at the election's coming up November 8th, what's the most important issue for you going into that?
For me, are these issues that we've just been talking about, those around growth. There's not going to be, just because Idaho's growing, that doesn't mean the Snake River is going to run more water. Just because Idaho's growing, that doesn't mean that there's going to be more and better roads and bridges, or more desks and more schools. We're going to have to take positive action in each of those areas, in all of our infrastructure, whether it's hard infrastructure on the roads and bridges and water diversions, or arguably the softer infrastructure that we have in our school system. But we always got to be found investing back in that to keep it cutting edge. And so that's what I'm all about. I'll be a very active lieutenant governor in that I will travel the state. I'll be in the meetings, and I'll take that information coupled with the experiences that I've had. I mean, I've been in the legislature for a while now. I'm the longest serving speaker in state history. The legislators that knew me best elected me 5 times in a row to be the speaker. I have the experience to apply on these problems that we all have, or that we're all going to have collectively as a state. And I'm totally vested in Idaho and its success. I've got all my kids live here. We have 14 grandkids that live here, and they're all in the school systems here. I want Idaho to succeed, but that success will be to stay out of your hair, the lightest possible touch of government, but to have opportunities so that our kids can stay here or return here and have a great job in the best place in the world. Mm-hmm.
We love Idaho.
We do.
Well, thank you again, Scott. Appreciate you making a stop by. I'm Rhett Nelson with EastIdahoNews.com. Thanks for watching.